us pray. At the beginning of this week, we ask you, Father, to renew and strengthen in us the awareness of our duty and privilege as members of this legislature. We ask you also in your divine providence to bless and protect the Assembly and the province we are elected to serve. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to present a petition received in my constituency office last week, signed by 229 people in the Calgary area, protesting the proposal to de-insure chiropractic services under the healthcare insurance plan.
Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to give a notice of motion that I would then subsequently ask honourable members to consent to dealing with today. I'd like to read it into the record. Be it resolved that the Assembly congratulates the Medicine Hat Tigers, its players, coaches and management for winning the 1987 Memorial Cup. This is emblematic of junior hockey supremacy in Canada. In the 69-year history of the Memorial Cup, this is only the fourth time the Cup has rested in Alberta and the first time since 1966.
Being somewhat prejudiced in this matter, the Chair asks for the unanimous consent of the House to deal with the motion. Opposed? Carried. Honourable Minister.
In moving the motion, Mr. Speaker, may I say very briefly that the motion speaks for itself, and I am indeed proud to represent the constituency. I must say as well that I was pleased to have had as a guest in Medicine Hat on Saturday the Honourable Member for Westlock Sturgeon, who advised me that he would enthusiastically support this resolution since he once tried out as a goaltender for the Tigers in his youth. And unfortunately didn't make that team at that time.
Little corner.
But he's here as part of the wider team of Alberta, this Assembly. And I appreciate the support indicated as well by the representatives of the other political parties, and I would hope, Mr. Speaker, that this motion would be passed unanimously today.
Question? Call for the question. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion carries. Let the record show unanimously, and the Chair will be only too pleased to send the necessary message of congratulations.
Introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce a bill being the Alberta Civil Service Welfare Fund Dissolution Act. Mr. Speaker, this repeals Section 27 of the Public Service Act and allows the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees to transfer the funds to a trust fund managed by the Union for the benefit of present and past members.
The Honourable Minister of Labour has moved first reading of Bill number 43, Alberta Civil Service Welfare Fund Dissolution Act. All those willing to give first reading, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion carries.
Bill 43, being Alberta Civil Service Welfare Fund Dissolution Act, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce Bill number 41, Small Producers Assistance Commission Act. This being a money bill, Her Honour, the Honourable the Lieutenant Governor, having been informed of the contents of this bill, recommends the same to the Assembly. Mr. Speaker, the bill provides for the creation of the Commission, as well as the powers and responsibilities of that Commission. Its main purpose is to assist small oil and gas producers by bringing together creditors of these producers in order to develop a financial plan to restore their viability.
The Honourable Minister of Energy has moved first reading of Bill number 41, Small Producers Assistance Commission Act. Those willing to give first reading, please say aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion carries.
Bill 41, being Small Producers Assistance Commission Act, introduced by Honourable Dr. Weber, is now read a first time. Reports.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to file with you and with the Assembly a copy of a news release issued at 1 p.m. today on the subject of modifications to the Alberta Healthcare Insurance Plan coverage, together with an attachment outlining in some detail the fee schedules which are involved, together with a fact sheet and a letter from myself to the citizens of Alberta, again outlining in some detail the nature of the changes that will become effective August 1st.
File response to motion for return number 168.
Minister of Tourism. Sir.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the 1985-86 annual report of the Department of Tourism.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table with the Assembly the 1986 annual report of the Occupational Health and Safety Council, together with the report for the year ended August 1, 1986, of the Alberta Public Health Advisory and Appeal Board.
Introduction of special guests.
Minister of Transportation and Utilities.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure to introduce to you and through you to the members of this Legislative Assembly 5 gifted and talented students from the grade 6 class, the challenge class of the Kennedy Elementary School in Grimshaw, located in the largest constituency in the province of Alberta. And they will be in the city for a few days until Thursday, and they'll be touring the University of Alberta. They'll be touring the Space Science Centre and other sites of note. And accompanying the 5 students are one teacher, Mrs. Jody Schroeder, and one parent, Mrs. Diane Wiedrich, and I would ask them to stand and receive the warm welcome of this Assembly.
Minister of Technology, Research and Telecommunications.
Mr. Speaker, it is a very rare pleasure for me today to be able to introduce some guests from China. Mr. Speaker, our Chinese visitors are from Heilongjiang. They are a delegation for scientific and technical cooperation. They're visiting Alberta this week to review the execution of the Science and Technology Exchange Agreement, which was signed in March of 1985 between Alberta and Heilongjiang Province, and a second agreement between the Alberta Research Council and Heilongjiang Academy of Science. This involves an exchange of 10 Chinese scientists and 10 Alberta scientists. Mr. Speaker, I would ask the visitors in the gallery, as I call their names, to rise. Professor Zhu, who is the chairman of the Science and Technology Commission and leader of the delegation. Mr. Chu, Professor and President of the Academy of Sciences of Heilongjiang Province. Mr. Xia, Senior Engineer. Ms. Chi, who is an interpreter and Director of the Foreign Affairs Office. Mr. Pan, Engineer and Deputy Director for Planning. And finally, Mr. Dai, who is the interpreter with them. I would ask that all members give them the traditional welcome.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my first question to the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care. Mr. Speaker, the Minister has announced outside this chamber that he will implement a series of unfair cuts on medical services provided by a group of medical specialties. Mr. Speaker, these cuts are unfair to the patients of these medical specialties, whose only crime, it seems, is that they require the services of medical personnel on the government hit list. The Minister has arbitrarily and punitively decided what is medically required for thousands of Albertans. My question to this Minister is, why didn't the Minister listen to the vast majority of Albertans who wanted these services left as they are? Is it only Tory backbenchers in the AMA he listens to?
First of all, Mr. Speaker, in answer to the latter part of the question, why did we not leave the services as they are? As I've indicated on a number of occasions in the Assembly, the cost of the health care insurance plan over the last 5 years has been increasing at the rate of 15% per year. We simply cannot continue to pay those very extensive increases in cost to the health care insurance plan. So we budgeted during this budget year, Mr. Speaker, for a budget of $694 million for health care insurance plan basic health services. We have a utilization increase of between 7 and 9%, and I have said for some length of time we would be bringing in measures to try to bring that budget back down to the actual amount that was in the provincial treasurer's budget address of a few weeks back. So what I've filed today, Mr. Speaker, is a combination of measures aimed at bringing that budget down. It has the cumulative effect on an annual basis of a $40 million reduction. We need to affect about probably $60 million. So I'm asking citizens to try to use our health care system with good judgment so that, in fact, we can gain that additional $20 million of reduction. In addition to that, the amendments don't take effect until August 1st, so we won't save the entire $40 million this year, but we're confident that with the other measures that I hope our citizens will take, that we can meet the budgetary figures. Now, Mr. Speaker, just in conclusion, there's nothing punitive about any parts of this plan. It's not aimed at any one group of individuals. It's fairly distributed in terms of services provided right across the board, and still provides a situation in this province where we have the most comprehensive and best coverage of any province in Canada.
Mr. Speaker, that's right. It's after average Albertans. That's who you're going after, Mr. Speaker. Because of this government's mismanagement, it's always average Albertans. And my question is simply this. You may recall that there was a 29% increase in Medicare premiums this year on top of all the other tax hikes. My question, in view of this huge increase, why did the minister not put a hold on further Medicare cutbacks so that our citizens don't have to pay 29% more for a heck of a lot less?
Well, Speaker, I think we've just explained that. The total decrease in the budget of the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care was certainly very, very minimal, even with the increase in health care insurance premiums. The honourable member has just now realized that it does indeed take a combination of increases in premiums and some reduction in the level of services provided to meet the budgetary target. If we had unlimited resources to pay increasing medical care costs, we wouldn't have been in a position of had to make these moves. But I say again, Mr. Speaker, that the moves that I announced today, we think are extremely fair. They are across all areas of services, and the impact on any one individual will be very, very minimal.
This minister is going to get surprised. You may think it's fair, but I'll tell you, average people will not think it's fair. Right. My question, looking at the services, Mr. Speaker, have to do with contraception, sterilization, and related procedures. We're going to cut these people off altogether. And the minister fails to realize that it's cheaper to make these services available as needed rather than deal with the problem of unwanted children later on. My question, if he's interested in saving money, why has the minister cut back or eliminated so many of the services which are basically preventive in nature?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, the honourable member didn't have an opportunity to read the full text of Attachment A. It begins by saying list of physician services not covered by the Alberta Health Care Insurance Plan unless medically required. And it ends by saying if a service should be medically required, it will be an insured benefit under the Alberta Health Care Insurance Plan. So, Mr. Speaker, we're talking about a number of items in the fee schedule for physicians that will not be covered if they're not medically required. And there's a number of these areas, for instance, contraceptive counseling, where the fee schedule provides a very good opportunity and terms of the annual checkup, in terms of a pregnancy, or a host of other areas for a medical practitioner to provide contraceptive counseling. In addition to that, my colleague, the Minister of Community and Occupational Health, and I have been discussing a variety of ways that we might work together and have community health clinics and others provide some of these kinds of services and do it a great deal more effectively, perhaps, than can be done on an individual contact basis with a medical doctor, even though there's still great opportunity in the fee schedule to provide those kinds of services.
Speaker, again, the minister just evades the question. I was talking about prevention. It's him that's deciding what's medically required. That's what's repulsive about this. And my question to the minister, I notice that people with vision problems will be forced to pay their own. We can't even have yearly checkups. But I'm worried about the trends, Mr. Speaker. Clearly this minister is leading us to a two-tiered system similar to in Britain. Would he now come clean and tell us precisely what is on his hit list in the very near future?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is completely mistaken and hasn't had yet an opportunity to review the material that was provided to him. There is no suggestion whatever that the Minister of Hospitals will decide what's medically necessary. Surely everyone in this Assembly would understand that a consideration of whether or not one of these items is a medically required service is one that's left to the physician that's attending the patient. I couldn't imagine a more absurd suggestion, Mr. Speaker, than the Honourable Leader of the Opposition suggesting that I would decide that kind of thing. Again, if a service under any of these fee schedules is determined by a medical practitioner to be medically required, then it will be covered. But that judgment is one that is for the medical practitioner to decide, not the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care. So I just conclude, Mr. Speaker, by saying the Honourable Leader's careful reading of the material will indicate again that no one has been unfairly impacted by all of these changes and that this province continues to have the best health care system in Canada.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon, followed by Calgary Northwest, followed by Clover Bar.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, if I may, to the minister. It's interesting to hear that he is not tampering with it when obviously you are cutting, and the minister is cutting treatment procedures, and this is a hardship. This is in the very front line of medical care. My, Mr. Speaker, is why does he choose to attack at the front line the treatment procedures rather than rationalization and utilization of hospital beds, for instance? Why don't we go at this one step at a time, see what you can save there before you cut here?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, there's nothing in here that involves the cutting of treatment procedures. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition was talking about some preventive health care measures, and a number of those which are listed here indeed are taken from the fee schedule unless they're medically required. Insofar as hospital utilization is concerned, I spoke at length in this House about the need to rationalize the hospital bed system. We had a decision with respect to the Edmonton General Hospital and the opening of the new Millwoods Hospital that reduced the number of active treatment beds in this city and increased the number of auxiliary care beds. We did the same in Calgary with regard to the opening of the Peter Lougheed Hospital. I've written the hospital boards right across the province offering to assist them in moving active treatment beds to auxiliary beds. There's a whole host of measures, Mr. Speaker, that have been undertaken, a host of other measures that are underway with regard to rationalization of the hospital system. If the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party has additional comments to make with regard to the rationalization of the hospital system, aside from his regular ones of suggesting we close rural hospitals, and I'd be pleased to receive them.
Calgary Northwest, followed by Clover Bar.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care, did the Minister and or his department consult with all of the provider groups of the health services so affected by these changes in the delivery of health and medical benefits?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Over the course of the last several weeks, I've met with or talked with all of the professional people that are involved in the various changes here. And this morning I met with, I either met with or talked by telephone in two cases with every professional organization that has an interest in the matters that are involved in both this news release and the attachments to it.
Clover Bar.
Speaker, a question supplementary to the Honourable Provincial or the Premier. In the old days before Lotto Canada and 649, we thought we were doing something for Irish hospitals when we bought sweepstake tickets. Is the government seriously considering tying some of the lottery funds directly to the Minister of Health and Hospitalized?
Mr. Speaker, we did deal with this matter last week, and I'm not sure whether the honourable member was in the House at the time, which we made the point that the system doesn't require more money being thrown at it. We already have the most expensive hospital medical care system per capita in Canada. We already spend more money on the system now, and therefore merely adding more dollars isn't the answer, because in fact it is amply funded. What we have to do is have it more efficient and operating for less dollars and providing still the excellent service. Nevertheless, I should say there has been an approach from a hospitals group in the province about the potential for a relatively narrow area of research that might be funded in this particular research from lotteries, and that is being given some active consideration.
Leader of the Opposition, second main question.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my second question to the Treasurer. Mr. Speaker, this morning the Conference Board of Canada issued its verdict on the Treasurer's 1987 provincial budget. There's no recovery in Alberta, and the Conference Board predicts that the Alberta economy will actually shrink by 1.1%. Mr. Speaker, the only province in Canada with a shrinking economy. My question to the Treasurer, is the Treasurer now reevaluating its taxation procedures, policies in view of the Conference Board's new startling forecast, or is he going to go full speed ahead, gouging average Albertans, at the same time lowering growth and adding to higher unemployment?
Mr. Speaker, the member from Norwood, of course, is well aware that the Conference Board, like many research institutions, from time to time does come down with statements which predict or suggest or formulate opinions about the future of certain economies. And we, from time to time, have these before us. And they are, Mr. Speaker, somewhat helpful in terms of providing some guidance as to what assumptions are involved in the conclusions. But I wouldn't want the record to go without having a full information that the Conference Board has in fact provided, Mr. Speaker. While the Conference Board has come close to the estimate that we provided in our budget, wherein we've indicated very clearly, Mr. Speaker, that there would be a lag of investment in this province through the first half of 1987, and that is clearly spelled out in our budget presentation. With the clear expectation that with the return of higher world oil prices, that in fact the return of investment in the oil and gas sector would, of course, flow. Now, Mr. Speaker, at the same time, the Conference Board points out very clearly that Alberta is not alone in facing this slow economic period. In fact, other provinces are, in fact, forecast to have a similar regime. Mr. Speaker, what should be noted, however, is that the Conference Board does go on to say that in terms of gross domestic product per capita, Alberta currently is the highest and will continue to be the highest in Canada over the forecast period. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, in terms of disposable income per capita, Alberta ranks, if not second, first, second, or third, depending on the measurements. What we have, Mr. Speaker, is clear indication that on a per capita basis, Albertans are well off, and in terms of disposable income, where the tax system protects those people in lower income, in fact, the disposable income is protected. Mr. Speaker, we know we have a challenge before us. We believe investment will come back to this province, and economic growth will come to here. The N in the NDP is for negative, Mr. Speaker.
You've been practicing for that one, haven't you?
That was a little weak. We expect more from him, Mr. Speaker. But what we do agree then, Mr. Speaker, is that, and the Treasurer is wrong, we're the only shrinking economy in the country. That's what it says, Mr. Speaker. Right. And the most alarming aspect of the Conference Board forecast is that this represents a second straight year of economic decline under this government. And my question to the Treasurer, how can the Treasurer justify, under these circumstances, taking over $1 billion from average people under these circumstances? How can you justify that?
Again, Mr. Speaker, we have had considerable debate here over the past few days, going back to March the 5th when we first reassembled. as to the impact of the fiscal plan presented by this government. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have argued clearly before that this $1.8 billion deficit, which is a very large deficit, probably one of the highest per capita deficits now in Alberta and Canada, will in fact allow the government expenditures to flow to the economy. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, the capital construction program of this province is significant, some $2.4 billion. Add to that the variety of new initiatives which this government has brought forward to stimulate new capital formation, new investment, Mr. Speaker. You can see, for example, that shows why the employment jobs per 1,000 in Alberta is again among the highest in Canada, if not the highest. What has happened, Mr. Speaker? The disposable income has been protected by the tax regime, by maintaining the lowest tax regime of any province in Canada. The investment will come back, Mr. Speaker, and I leave a question to all members. I wonder if the Conference Board, in fact, reflected the new federal energy initiatives, which surely are going to trigger a new expenditure, new investment in this province. And I think with the price of oil on Friday trading close to $19.86 U.S., that's going to bring a new series of confidence back into this province. I'm betting on the future of this province, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not a naysayer.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're all betting on the future of this province because there won't be a Tory government in a couple of years. Mr. Speaker, just to go back to the Treasurer's own words, and he says in his budget that the labor market is expected to weaken in 1987. That's his own words, not the Conference Board. Would the Treasurer now tell us how many more unemployed then he expects flowing from his budget?
Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm very optimistic about the reduction, in fact, of unemployment in this province. And as my colleague, the Minister of Career Development and Employment, and others, including the Premier, said, any level of unemployment in this province is not acceptable. But we're bringing forward initiatives, Mr. Speaker, which are unmatched anywhere in Canada with respect to new initiatives, because we know that it is, in fact, the private sector that generates jobs. And we're going to wait until the opposition, the socialist dogma types across the way, realize that. Until they do, Mr. Speaker, there's no hope for their position.
Mr. Speaker, we're just trying to find out what this Treasurer means. Now he tells us that his budget's all wrong. When he says that the labor market is expected to weaken in 1987, could he explain when he says that how that means that there will be an increase in employment? Was he lying in the budget then and now he's correct, or what's going on?
He's confused. Mr. Speaker, one knows that when you cast a budget in place that you're taking some risk and extending the forecast period. You're dealing with about a 15-month period, Mr. Speaker, when amazing things can happen. And let's remember what in fact has happened in this province since the budget was first structured. First of all, we have seen a new resurgence in the price of energy. We've seen energy now move out of that low 1986 period a year ago. No one expected the price of energy to go to $9 or $10, Mr. Speaker, and now it's trading well into the $19 to $20 U.S. range. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, other initiatives in two sectors in particular have supported the strengths of this economy. Agriculture in particular, energy more specifically, as I've mentioned. Mr. Speaker, those are changing dynamics. Now, I know that the frenzied socialists across the way can't adjust to that dynamic situation. They're stagnant in their thinking, Mr. Speaker. We refuse to be locked like that. This government is moving, this government is progressive, and we're going to respond to the needs of these Albertans.
Member for Edmonton Meadowlark, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Treasurer, will the Treasurer consider revising his budget to better reflect economic reality in Alberta, economic reality that is distinguished by the Conference Board of Canada, by establishing a 6-year plan for balancing the budget or an 8-year plan for balancing the budget rather than his present 4-year plan, thereby freeing up some money now to create jobs, to provide needed human services, and to assist in diversifying the economy?
Mr. Speaker, if there had been some fault with the budget in terms of providing jobs, then I would entertain a series of recommendations as to how we could adjust and to improve on the number of jobs which will be generated in this province. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, if you look at our record, the record of this government going back even to May 8th, 1986, you will see a clear priority spelt out in everything we have done to do the following: to initiate new jobs, to trigger new investment in this province, to create economic certainty over the future, to deal with the deficit, Mr. Speaker, and bring back a resurgence to this province. That's the clear message we're leaving to Albertans, Mr. Speaker. They understand it, and they're supporting our initiatives.
Supplementary. Supplementary, Clover Bar.
Speaker, a supplementary question to the Honourable Provincial Treasurer. In light of the fact that the budgeting process is the expenditure of funds that belong to all Albertans, would the Treasurer seriously consider calling in the mayors of the major cities, the reeves of the counties, and having a consultative process 2 or 3 months before the provincial budget comes in? Would the Minister seriously consider that?
Speaker, that's a worthy suggestion. It is in fact true that over the course of forming the principles to a budget that you seek advice from a variety of sources. From time to time, I listen for the member from Norwood, for example. I very seldom agree with them, but I do listen to him for advice, Mr. Speaker. Nonetheless, it is, of course, worth considering ways in which we can form the principles for the next budget process, which will be initiated soon. And clearly, we look to our partners in government in this province, the municipalities. I know my colleague, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, is always in constant contact with those leaders in local government. We respect their views, and that's a very worthy recommendation, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to ask a question of the Premier. Over the past number of months, the Liberal opposition has been very critical of the fact that this government has repeatedly let out contracts without going to tender. Recently, another secret contract deal, Mr. Speaker, was for a book commemorating the anniversary of this legislature. It was given to a faithful Tory without providing other Alberta publishers a chance to bid for the contract. But to the Premier, why do we not have a public tendering process for the government contracts?
Mr. Speaker, in every case when it is possible to, without directing a particular contract in some that is maybe location-oriented or site-specific in terms of the service that can be provided, there is open public tender.
Mr. Speaker, I think that's news to many. Well, in this case, then, would the Premier instruct the Speaker to provide Alberta publishers with an opportunity to bid on this particular contract?
Would the honourable member, would you want me to instruct who? Who did you want me to instruct?
I've asked the Premier whether he would instruct Mr. Speaker to provide Alberta publishers with an opportunity to bid for the contract of this particular book.
Chair would remind the Leader of the Liberal Party to look at brochure 365. The Chair is entirely willing to discuss the matter with any member of the House privately, but it's not a matter of discussion for the House, and that's the procedure according to brochure. Chair recognizes the member for Clover Bar. Well, let's try them. Please, let's try them.
You threw one out, but I have a couple others here, maybe a little easier. Mr. Speaker, then, will the Premier instruct the Minister of Public Works, Supply and Services to prepare a new government contracting policy ensuring that all government contracts are tendered publicly?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I dealt with that in answering his first question.
Obviously, you didn't. You didn't, Mr. Speaker. The Premier is cavilling a bit here. Given that this is not the first controversy this session involving secret sweetheart government contracts for Tory faithful, will the Premier at least agree to a public review of the government contracting practices, the first stage of which would be to support the Alberta Liberal Party's private members' Bill number 243, calling for every contract over $50,000 to be let publicly? Would he do that?
First of all, Mr. Speaker, there have been no secret sweetheart tendering contracts for Tory faithful. But secondly, Mr. Speaker, when a bill is presented to the House, the onus is on the person presenting it. Convince the House, and you carry the day.
Main question or supplementary? Clover Bar, main question or supplementary?
Premier, once in a while, should smile when he makes those remarks. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Energy, and this has to do with the natural gas sales to Manitoba. Is the Minister in a position to indicate what progress is being made in the deal that's going on to negotiate either the maintenance of the natural gas prices for Manitoba or the lowering of the prices, in light of the fact that the prices were lowered to Quebec and Ontario. What is the status of the negotiations with Manitoba?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the status of the negotiations are that Western Gas Marketing entered into a contract with the utilities in Manitoba for a 2-year pricing deal with some discounted prices from the previous contract, and the Manitoba government went to the Public Utilities Board in Manitoba to try to have the Public Utilities Board indicate that the rates associated with those contracts not be approved. However, the Manitoba Public Utilities Board did approve those rates and approve the price in those contracts for a time period up until the end of October of this year. And also the Public Utilities Board ruled on other matters, and at the present time, since the contract is valid and in place, there's no discussions going on to revise that contract.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister supplementary, in light of the fact that the Manitoba users seem to be charging, that they're being overcharged $150 per home, is the Minister in a position to indicate if there's any danger of the Manitoba consumer looking elsewhere and Alberta losing about almost $200 million in revenue?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that Manitoba look at getting rid of their tax that has been netted back to Alberta producers, and subsequently through the contract between Western Gas Marketing and the utilities put back onto Manitoba consumers, that the Manitoba government get rid of that tax.
But Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, is there any danger of the province of Alberta losing the market in Manitoba, yes or no?
Well, Mr. Speaker, a contract is in place, and I would hope that the Manitoba government would respect that contract.
Final supplementary, Cloverbar, Calgary Buffalo.
Yes, thank you. Supplementary to the Minister. Contracts are in Alberta are possible with universities and municipalities if regulatory approval is maintained, and this is in accordance with what the Manitoba government is seeking. I wonder if the Minister might inform the House as to the government's position about plans of institutions such as the University of Alberta to obtain approval to get the right to purchase gas directly and save up to $2 million a year.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is stretching things a bit to try to get a supplementary on the University of Alberta tendering process that they put in place, tying that to the Manitoba Public Utilities Board case. However, we indicated a few weeks ago that as a result of the ERCB's decision that there should be a surplus of 15 years in place for the core market, that there also should be contracts to reflect that surplus criteria. So we outlined a policy indicating that those who were going to enter into contracts in the core area would have to enter into the long-term contract area. If, however, the University of Alberta decides to or is able to find a gas on a 15-year contract, they would have to go through the normal process of going to the Public Utilities Board for approval.
Calgary Forest Lawn supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Energy, does the Government of Alberta have a contingency plan in place in the event that other public utility boards order that prices of gas be driven down?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Manitoba Public Utilities Board didn't order that the prices be driven down. In fact, they approved the pricing situation between Western Gas Marketing and the utilities in Manitoba. It's a hypothetical question in a sense, in that we haven't had a body come out directly to drive prices down, and we'd have to deal with it as those situations occur.
Member for Red Deer North, followed by Edmonton Calder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Advanced Education. The Canadian Business Task Force on Literacy estimates that there are 4.5 million Canadians who are functionally illiterate, and further estimates show that among the unemployed, functional illiteracy may be as high as 70%. This is using a definition of illiteracy as having grade 9 or less and being unable to comprehend want ads, job resumes, or basic training manuals. Is the Department of Education presently dealing with this difficulty by making funds available to our colleges and institutions to develop programs which deal specifically with the problem of adult illiteracy?
In answer to the question, there are some programs in place now, Mr. Speaker. I should say, though, that I have difficulty in agreeing with the definition of adult illiteracy as being anything less than a grade 9 education. I think that would be offensive to many Canadian citizens who are quite literate and who have had less formal schooling than that. Nonetheless, the Department of Advanced Education does have special programs worth about $1.3 million in place for persons with specific literacy problems. That's in addition to the English as a Second Language program, which deals with many of the newcomers to Canada who have language difficulties, which is different but related to what we're talking about. And in addition to that, there are a number of special programs in place, about $10 million worth, for persons in penal institutions and adults still striving to get basic high school education in order to upgrade their literacy skills.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, the grade 9 definition only being used in conjunction with lack of comprehension with want ads and basic training manuals. But given the fact that most illiterate adults feel embarrassed about something which is really not their fault, is the Minister considering any kind of public appeal program which might coax large numbers of these people in out of the cold, as it were, to training programs which could specifically deal with their literacy?
Well, as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, my colleague, the Minister of Education, and myself were developing some programs which were to be put forward as additional budget items this year. We know what happened to those kinds of requests this year. This was not the year for them, but certainly it's a program and a problem that will be given ongoing attention.
Supplementary to the Minister of Career Development and Employment, in recognition of the fact that illiterate adults usually try to hide their handicap, does the department have ways of screening or testing adults in its various training programs to determine their level of literacy so that they can be helped?
Mr. Speaker, there's really two answers to the one question. First answer is that in the private sector, where the majority of our training takes place, it is up to the people providing that training to determine the level of literacy by the individuals who are coming on to the training program. And certainly we as a department, the second component to that question, Mr. Speaker, is that we as a department, through the Alberta Career Centres, do try and determine the level of literacy by individuals who come to the career centres looking for opportunities to upgrade their skills. I should also say that our department, under the Alberta Vocational Training Program, provides some $12 million in the area of literacy training together with English as a second language. I believe that of those dollars, 2 out of every 5 of those dollars, 40%, I believe, goes to literacy competency. And I think 2 out of 5 individuals who come in under the program are for literacy training, and I believe that's some 5,000 individuals. So we are, on an ongoing basis, trying to address it in our programming, Mr. Speaker.
Final supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Education. Since many adult illiterates only do have a grade 9 education or less, has the minister been able to evaluate the junior high program of studies to ensure that even if a student only goes as far as grade 9, his verbal and math skills would still be adequate enough to allow him to function at a reasonable degree of literacy?
Mr. Speaker, I have somewhat of a problem with the terms adequate enough. I would not want to counsel any young Albertan to pursue anything less than excellence in his education and in the highest degree of educational attainment possible. I think that young Albertans should not limit themselves to a functional capacity because they deserve and need and have access to far better than that.
Edmonton Millwoods, Calgary Buffalo.
Mr. Speaker, given the long and increasing waiting lists that people trying to get into literacy programs wait, can the Minister of Advanced Education advise the House what monitoring he is doing of these waiting lists and how long he considers to be an adequate period for people waiting to get into literacy programs? Is it a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years? How long are people going to have to wait?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't quite understand the question. If the questioner wants to put it another way, I described the programs that are in place and the money that is being spent, the special target groups that the department does have in mind. I'm a little curious as to these long waiting lists that the member refers to. The problem, as has been explained earlier, is to encourage people to come and take advantage of the programs.
Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister of Education, who is responsible for dealing with these problems with children, which is where the issue should be addressed. What plans does the Minister have to improve the quality of education for those children with learning disabilities in light of the cuts in those programs in Calgary and other centres, the only result of which can be greater illiteracy and future serious problems for them and this community in the future?
Well, Mr. Speaker, there is definitely a balance between providing preventative programs for young people to ensure that they don't become illiterate adults, as well as the use of resources to address the need in adults. The special education program, which is the rather oblique reference to the first question, does in fact look at the different needs of students and how they learn. And certainly within special education, it is clearly a priority of this government, as evidenced by the fact that there will be no reduction over last year in our support for special education all across this province in 87-88.
Edmonton Calder, followed by Calgary Foothills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are to the Minister of Social Services. The high level of commercially owned child care centres in this province is a stumbling block to receiving the full potential of funding from the federal government under the Canadian Assistance Plan. Many parents and child care deliverers are concerned that the Minister will be implementing a needs test to secure more CAP funding and will be implementing or eliminating, the operating allowance for daycare, further limiting access to child care in Alberta. My question to the Minister is this: what is the Minister's intention with respect to the operating allowance for daycare? Is she considering withdrawing this allowance?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member raises a very important question and rather a timely one as a result of what seems to be a public campaign at this point in time by an organization that I have yet to meet, and we seem to have some difficulty getting in touch with. But I would say that it's important to, first of all, say that, again, that I am doing a full review of the child care area, and certainly I have to take into consideration the funding that should be flowing under the CAP agreement or whatever arrangement that the federal government will finally come to. Our problem has been that we do not know what the ultimate arrangement will be with the federal government. The department has undertaken various scenarios in terms of a development of plans that could be necessary, none of which are approved. They are literally on red alert in the event that we need to address quickly the situation, depending on how it unfolds federally.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. Will the minister be discussing with her federal counterpart, Jake Epp, the introduction of a needs test in order to take advantage of CAP funding for profit daycare centres?
Mr. Speaker, I think that the opposition to some degree has agreed with government comments that we should be directing our funding in terms of the daycare allocation to those in most need. And I think it is well known in the public as well as in this House that an operating allowance flows to child care centres right across the province, and it flows without regard to the income that an individual family may be making. Now, certainly, the funds expended in Alberta are far beyond, on a per capita basis, any other government in Canada. And I have said publicly that I may have to redirect some of those funds. What form the allowances will take, I can't say at this point in time, because that is an administrative function. But I can assure the honourable member that the most generous subsidies possibly available will be certainly in the province of Alberta, as they historically have been.
Supplementary to the minister, Mr. Speaker. We certainly are losing a lot of money every year as well. Does the minister foresee any other alternatives for increasing the federal contribution through CAP without implementing a needs test?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the federal minister on many occasions has certainly said that he believes that the centres should be the choice of the parent. And if the spokesman on behalf of the opposition is saying that parents in this province shouldn't have a choice with respect to child care, then I am very interested in that statement. It's certainly one that I would make widely known. This government happens to take the position that parents in the province of Alberta are in the very best position to speak to the child care arrangements that they would wish. And certainly we are continuing to press the government, the federal government, to prepare a policy that is fair to all of those parents and acknowledges the choices that they indeed are making.
Final supplementary to the minister. I'm sure parents would like to get a hold of some of that money that we're losing. In view of the fact that Alberta could gain millions of dollars each year in increased CAP funding if more non-profit centres existed in this province, will the minister see the light and give greater support for non-profit centres?
Mr. Speaker, the arrangements with respect to childcare in this province have grown in a way that has been determined by the choice of the families. And, Mr. Speaker, I will continue my very best efforts to make choices available to those families.
Edmonton Clover Bar, followed by Calgary Foothills. Supplementaries. Sorry, Gold Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Standards, monitoring, and accountability, Mr. Speaker, all absolutely essential for privatization and commercialization of human services. When will the minister make the report on generic standards available for public consultation? We desperately need it before mistakes are made.
Mr. Speaker, I am not sure whether the honourable member question is asked in the context of the daycare discussion. Well, we do have standards in place in the province of Alberta, and I think they're very well known. I realize that as the opposition grumbles over there, that they are continually speaking to the education that is inherent in the workers in the child care centres. And as I have said before, that particular area is certainly under review. It wouldn't be, at least in the terms of the time frame ahead of me, something that I would want to speak to out of the context of all the changes that might take place in childcare, not only as a result of our review here in the province of Alberta, but also as a result of the announcements that the federal government may make that we may believe to be appropriate and would want to work in concert with them on.
Calgary Foothills supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question to the minister goes back to these persistent rumors, and in April I asked the question of the minister. She mentioned that there would be a meeting with provincial colleagues. When is this meeting scheduled, Mr. Minister, Madam Minister, and has the federal government indicated just when they will present their proposals for childcare to the provinces?
Time for question period has expired. Might we complete this series of questions? Opposed? Carried on. Minister, please.
Mr. Speaker, indeed, that is one of the significant hurdles that we face in the province of Alberta, because we've had this item under discussion over the course of the last year, and we're promised a report and some conclusions by the federal government last fall. As yet, we have not seen the form of what the federal policy will take. We have seen a task force report, and in fact the federal minister, in response to the task force report, it still has not indicated how much support within the federal government there is for that report. The ministers across the country that work in the same area that is under discussion here have indicated some major problems with respect to their own time in meeting together prior to the provincial meeting of ministers, which is approximately 2 weeks away. At that time, the ministers will be discussing this question, but unfortunately, the federal government has still not given us an indication of how soon after that meeting they will be letting us in on whatever their proposals are.
Orders of the day. Might we revert briefly to introduction of special guests?